Hello and good morning, dear students. I am Professor Sunita Suresh Borde from KTHM College, Nasik. We had started our lectures. In the previous lecture, we had discussed about the history of Indian English literature before independence. And today, I am going to present history of Indian English literature after independence. So before going to directly the history of Indian English literature, let's have a look at learning objectives of today's session. After going through this unit, you will be able to discuss social and intellectual context that shaped the post-independence Indian English literature. You will also be able to identify the major literary forms that maturated in the post-independence Indian English literature. You will also come to know the names of the important writers in the field of prose, poetry and drama. Important literary works of the contemporary writers. Dear students, in the previous unit, you have got a glimpse of Indian English literature before independence. And now, we'll discuss the course of Indian English literature after independence. Post-independence era of Indian literature had seen the emergence of many Indian writers in English, as the social environment turned out to be more advantageous for writers as it provided liberty of thoughts. Indian writing in English gradually started to develop and took time to receive worldwide recognition. The writers started writing in English in the mid-19th century had to face initial problems, as they had to run from pillar to post for getting their works published. However, resolute minds never break down to difficulties, and ultimately it was the win of human endeavors. Gradually, they received publishers. Post-independence era of Indian English literature had seen the emergence of many Indian writers in English, as the social environment turned out to be more advantageous for writer as it provided liberty of thoughts. Now, let's see the social and intellectual context of the time. The social sphere, India had to encounter various problems after the independence. The incoherent and hasty independence brought a sea of problems, and the first among them was the communal violence between Hindus and Muslims. The ethnic violence caused countless deaths and left many casualties. Mahatma Gandhi's deliberate but innocent ploy succeeded that diminished the communal violence for a while, and Jawaharlal Nehru declared India a secular nation. Besides the communal violence, there was the problem of princely states. Many princely states denied to be a part of India, part of free India. They wanted to remain in their previous state, in their previous stage and state as a prince of a particular region. But political thinkers of India of those times sensed the trouble and immediately worked for evading the problem. And stalwarts like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was successful to amalgamate those states to Indian democracy. Moreover, India involved in three brief but fierce battles with neighboring countries. The first one was fought during 1962, the second one was during 1965, and the third one was during 1971, respectively with China and Pakistan, our neighbor country. This these conditions dismantled Indian economy and destroyed the social setup of India. Moreover, there are other issues too. The widespread corruption caused riots in Indian society. Many writers of the time addressed such issues in their writing. Now let's move on to the intellectual context of the literature. One of the major development after the independence that has multifarious significance was the decision of Indian government to become a frugal partner and a member of the British Commonwealth. The Indian writers in English now received not only Indian readers but also foreign readers, and it really accelerated the growth of Indian English literature. Moreover, Sahitya Academy started recognizing the contributions of the Indian English writers to the rich heritage of Indian literature by conferring Sahitya Academy Award to the Indian English writers. Although the inheritance of the English language went through many stages of modifications in India, the most subtle impact of the British colony in India was the English language. Indian English poets in the late 1940s started to adopt a post romantic legacy that exchanged a received stylistic collection to local elements. One of the exponents of new poetry in the post-independence was Nissim Ezekiel. Nissim Ezekiel, an Indian Jewish poet, playwright, actor, editor, and art critic, was migrated to India from Israel. He was an admirer of T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden. He expressively writes about the search for identity and alienation. One of the early Indian poets to receive universal recognition was Dom Morris. He was the winner of Hawthornden Prize in 1958 and was the first Indian poet to receive such a global recognition. The post-independence period saw the rise of many Indian poets in English with international repute, and among them are Nissim Ezekiel, A.K. Ramanujan, R. Parthasarathi, Jayant Mahapatra, Kamla Das, Dilip Chitre, Giv Patel, Arun Mehrotra, and Arun Koletkar. Now let's switch on the next slide where we'll discuss the history of Indian English drama after independence. Indian drama saw the comprehensive development after the independence, as the dramatists before independence did not give enough density to reliability and stage worthiness of their plays. Indian drama received a fresh start when Kendriya Natak Sangeet Academy got underway in January 1953 and the setting up of Sangeet Natak Academy in 1959 was another stimulus to the Indian drama. By 1960s, English drama saw the concoction of various fitting styles and techniques from Sanskrit and Western theatre. By the 1970s, Indian English drama fully flourished in the hands of Badal Sarkar, Vijay Tendulkar, Girish Karnad, and Mahesh Dattani. They were instrumental to the modernization of Indian theatre. Bold metamorphoses and efficacious experiments in terms of thematic concerns and technical virtuosities, accelerated the modernization of Indian theatre. Moreover, their use of legends, Indian myths, Indian folklore, Indian history fructified imposing results. The other renowned playwrights of the age was Badal Sarkar, Vijay Tendulkar, Girish Karnad, Mahesh Dattani, Satish Adekar, Mahesh Elkunswar. Now, let's move on the next slide, where we'll discuss the history of Indian English prose. In Indian English history, there were some prose written by M.K. Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru's panoramic display of world history, and then to the agile prose with political sensitive issues constitute the major prose works following the independence. Apart from political prose, autobiography, travelogue, religious writing, historical writings, as well as social criticism continue to thrive in context of post-colonial Indian prose. One of the exponents of non-fictional prose in the post-colonial India was Nirad C. Chaudhary, who ventures to explore political and religious development in India. Remarkable contribution of Nirad Chaudhary to Indian prose is his prose, A Passage to India. It was a result of his short visit to England in 1955. There was another work by Nirad C. Chaudhary, The Intellectual in India. The next important prose writer in history of Indian English literature was Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Chaitanya is first among the notable post-colonial Indian prose writer, and whose prose, A New History of Sanskrit Literature, ventures to draw a balanced literary evaluation of the Sanskrit studies in India. Another notable contributor was S.C. Sengupta, who wrote Shakespearean comedy and Shakespeare's historical plays. Another important name in the field of prose was K.R. Srinivasa. Now, my dear students, we'll discuss the history of Indian English fiction after independence. In the previous unit, you have read about Indian English fiction preceding India's independence. The 2 decades just before the independence were momentous for the rise of nationalism and Indian novels in English. The prominent fiction writer of 1930s and 1940s are Babani Bhattacharya, Raja Rao, A. Menon and G.V. Desani, and some others continued writing even after the independence. Their nationalism was colored and sometimes tempered by expressive cosmopolitanism of outlook, as most of these writers spent a considerable period of their lives in Europe. Their writings are often accentuated by a sense of cultural derangement that has also become the characteristic feature of the post-colonial Indian fiction. Indian fiction in English did not produce substantially important novels immediately after the independence, because you know that many writers felt there was something unpatriotic about writing in the language of recently departed country, that is Britishers. Okay, and many pre-independence Indian writers continued writing fiction, but the recognition of R.K. Narayan's creative prowess by Sahitya Academy provided the much needed fillip to Indian fiction. He was awarded Sahitya Academy Award in 1960 for his novel, the well-known novel on which there was a film. Okay, film adaptation of this novel was there. That is, the name of the novel is The Guide. The post-independent Indian fiction saw the rise of character development and psychological depth. Depth-wise development of narrative, then length-wise development became the hallmark of post-independence Indian fiction. The themes of the novels of that period: the rise of character development and psychological depth, then alienation and partition. Kushwant Singh's famous novel Train to Pakistan is based on the partition theme. Even other his novels were also somehow based upon the theme of partition, alienation, the rise of character development and psychological depth. Moreover, the advantageous social condition was capitalized by the women writers, and the theme of alienation came to a special age in the numerous novels published by women in the period. The most prominent post-independence women writers are Anita Desai, Kamla Markandeya, Nayantara Sehgal, and Ruth Prawar Jabwala. So, this is for today's presentation. My dear students, thank you very much for attending this presentation. If you have any queries, if you have any doubts, we'll discuss it in Google Classroom, okay, in through Google Meet. So, join my lecture in Google Meet. So, we'll discuss this presentation and your queries in Google Meet. Thank you very much for today. Stay at home and stay safe.